Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joining me, as always, my good colleague and pal, quite possibly also an American idiot, Mr. Brian E. Roach. What's up, my friend Brian? Green Day shirt going on today.
Yes, I'm in. This is my official Green Day shirt from the concert in Philadelphia with a picture from the concert in Philadelphia.
All right. You know what? I don't know if you've ever done this before, but I threw my kid off. Like, I get like a photo and it's like, you know, the whole Acrisure Stadium or Heinz Field or whatever, you know, like the giant panning of the crowd. And you're literally like a little dot, even on TV. And I'm like, hey, look, I'm on TV. And she's like, where? And you got to pause it. And then I'm like, it's like, well, we can't see you. I'm like, but I'm still on. I'm there. I know I'm there. I'm on TV. So, I love it. I love it. I love it. Is that the kind of photo that you're referring to with the Green Day concert?
No, definitely not in this picture. I am not in this picture. This is just him jumping on the stage. I just thought it was. So all I can really say is I was in the audience and I saw him do this move because this picture was taken during the concert that I was at.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I doubt you watched any of the Pro Bowl.
As I very, very, very aggressively stated, the Pro Bowl is dumb, and I did not watch 1 second of it.
Okay, well, I caught a little bit, just pieces here or there, skills comp. I was watching the blowout flag football game where there's like no defense and some referees who, you know, they use the flag football referees. I don't really want to disparage anybody there, but they don't appear the same on television as the NFL or even the college variety, right? These guys look like they're like weekend warriors that are officiating the game in Orlando. I caught some of it because I was at a random sports bar and it was on. Okay, so it's like I didn't go out of my way to watch it. I saw some of the highlights, and that's about where it ended. But where it ended was, I can't remember if I remember we were talking last week and we were like, hey, Russell Wilson made the Pro Bowl. Well, so did Patrick Queen, I think, just shortly after we recorded.
Yeah.
The Steelers ended up with like 8 Pro Bowlers somehow. Now, TJ didn't play in the game. Cam Hayward, they don't use defensive linemen like they in the flag football. They use, you know, they're in dodgeball. Boswell's in dodgeball. I think Queen was in dodgeball. Actually, I don't think Cam was in dodgeball. I think he was in the tug of war, whatever it may be. And we've got some more NFL.
Didn't they have a game show too? I think Cam was in the game show.
Yeah, they did a trivia. Yeah, it was like Russell Wilson and Myles Garrett on the same team, I think, or something like that.
I don't know. Dumb. Let me just restate this. It's dumb.
It is, and they're trying. All of these sports leagues are trying so hard to get people interested in their all-star games, and they just don't. They don't have like the panache or the spectacle or anything. You know what it is? I saw somebody float this by, and I think we're going to talk about some of the internet stuff that's rumors, along with the roster shape up maybe for next year for the Steelers or this year, but next season, 2025. We still have one more game left this season that I'm not sure either one of us care about. I think the Eagles will win. That's just my personal pick here, but I could care less at this point.
I would prefer that the Eagles win simply because I don't want the Chiefs to win 3 in a row.
Yeah.
I'm tired of the Chiefs. I would like somebody else to win.
By chance, did you see someone was asking Patrick Mahomes which of his referees were his favorite, and if he had any on his Christmas card list? And he handled it like he was very snarky, but he handled it pretty well. Now, I guess the NFL Referees Union is kind of upset about all of the various barbs and jabs that everyone's taken and saying that they're favored and everything. It just, you know, that's what happens. For whatever reason, we turn into a society that doesn't like winners. I think what it is we like the underdogs until they win. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, this is obnoxious. We want something else. And I think everyone would have been cool with like the Detroit Lions and Buffalo Bills in a Super Bowl. But right now it's like, wow, we saw this game already, you know, and I'll still watch. I enjoyed the commercials, even though they've been kind of watered down and just, I mean, to be a bad pun, commercialized over the years. But they lack the substance that they used to. And I guess that's going to happen depending on who's paying for the ads. So
I will tell you, this is exactly how I will watch the game.
Scrolling through your phone.
I will play a phone game and pay attention when I need to. There's not a lot of drama in this game. Maybe there will be. Maybe I'll start watching and I'll get into it. I don't have a big passion for either team. I can find reasons why I want them both to lose. I don't want to deal with Philly fans if the Eagles win. I live there, so I don't want to deal with them. I just don't want the Chiefs to win. So I feel like this is another one of those Super Bowls where no matter what happens, I won't really like the outcome.
What was funny about that is a few years ago we had the Harbaugh Bowl. And it was Jim Harbaugh leading the 49ers against John Harbaugh's Ravens. What was that, 2012? The 2012 season. And I remember saying, like, is it possible that Bane can show up and just blow up the stadium? And we got close.
That would be ideal.
The Superdome lost power, and they had to delay in the middle of the game. Well, guess where it's being hosted again? So, what's kind of funny, too, is I'm working on a piece for the website later this week. I was just reviewing Super Bowls. The Super Bowl IX, the Steelers' first appearance, also in New Orleans, Tulane Stadium, which held, I got into a rabbit hole. You get on the Wikipedia and you start reading things. This happened to me with New Coke like a month or two ago. And yeah, that's a rabbit hole I don't want to go back down. Or who has the distribution rights for Dr. Pepper? That's where it led to. Well, this led me from Super Bowl, Superdome to Tulane Stadium, which hosted 3 of the first 9 Super Bowls. And Tulane wasn't supposed to host Super Bowl IX with the Steelers and Vikings. And it was because the Superdome was like over budget, delayed, wasn't ready in time. And it was ready right after that. The game was hosted like January 1975. This is like several years before I was even thought of. And they end up hosting the game. The Superdome opens like later that year. And citation required, but Tulane Stadium was basically almost instantly condemned. It was torn down within 5 years, which is just mind-blowing because it like opened in the early 1900s, which I don't know if any kids approach you with this, but they look at me now, Brian, when I was born in 1981, right? So I missed the Super Bowls, the 70s heydays. I was, very, very, very young, even with the Bubby Brister stuff. So I don't have as much pain of going through the 80s and the 80s Steelers teams. But you ever have one of these kids come to you and they're like, you're born in 1981? Oh, you were born in the 1900s. And it's like, yeah, no, that's not quite how that works. But anyway,
no,
we are looking at...
Nobody talks to me about that.
Because you were born in the 1800s, maybe. So,
no.
But anyways, Brian, some of the things floating around, obviously... Where do we want to begin with this?
Where do you want to start with? Let's start with the big one.
Myles Garrett?
Start with that.
Which one?
The big one. Myles Garrett is the big one. Cooper Kupp's a little tiny guy. Myles Garrett's a big giant guy. And the answer is no.
Well,
just no. It's just no.
I wrote about this on the website a day or two ago. Go back, may have been today's release. I sometimes I forget. I'm crafting these things. You got to schedule them, put them in the pipeline. SteelCityUnderground.com. I said, are the Steelers a likely landing spot or an unlikely landing spot for Myles Garrett? And that's for a number of reasons. Number one, the Browns are in the same division. They're not going to trade their best player to a division rival and make them even stronger. Number two, where's he play for the Steelers? Is he a hand in the dirt or not? And they don't need guys that are technically edge rushers, but he's got the frame. He could probably play the same as Cam. He's not much smaller than a Cam Hayward. I think Cam's got him by 10, 15 pounds. I don't even think he has a height advantage on him, to be honest. So maybe he could play like the Steelers, a 3-4 defensive end that the Steelers do, or with their, nickel scheme without the nose tackle that they use. Does that affect the way that he plays? No, you just keep sending him after the quarterback because that dude don't drop in coverage to begin with. And you already got what? You got Alex Highsmith. You've got Nick Herbig. So the other problem is the salary he's going to command. His base salary, it's going to be interesting to see what the Browns would do with that contract. They have said they're not interested in trading him. Andrew Berry said no. Kevin Stefanski, all these guys were saying no. And then he comes out Monday and was like, I'm demanding a trade. And it's like, that team needs him. They can't get rid of him.
The answer is going to be, we need you until we can get 2 or 3 first-round picks. If somebody is willing to offer them 2 first-round picks for Myles Garrett, I think they'll trade him.
Well,
to be honest, I don't think anybody's going to offer 2 first-round picks. 1, yeah, for sure. But anything else is probably a lower round pick. Maybe a player, right? If they can start a rebuild off of Myles Garrett going someplace else, sure, then I think they would. If they're smart at this point, I think they should. The problem is, I don't think they're going to get those kind of offers. Because you know why? Because the Cleveland Browns aren't available to trade with.
I don't know. I heard a good quote on XM radio, and somebody said, you would be dumb if you're in a front office of any of the other 31 NFL teams to at least not ask the question, at least not entertain the idea. And I agree with that. You entertain the idea and you say to yourself, could this work? Could we get him? What would it take? And then you're disqualifying yourself like we just did. Number one, when Khalil Mack went to the Chicago Bears, traded from the then Oakland Raiders. Let's see. Khalil Mack was 26 years old. He just came off of a 10.5 sack season. He had 3 of his 4 years in the league with double-digit sacks. Chicago, there was a couple other picks, like late rounds mixed in this, but overall, the big piece of this was Chicago sent 2 first-rounders, the current year, the next year, and then they sent like a 3rd or a 4th, and then the guys like swapped like a 5th and 6th or something like that, right? You would have to think that that's probably a very similar valuation for Myles Garrett, although Myles Garrett is a tad older. He's 29 years old right now. He just turned 29 back in December, late in the year, December 29th. So he's not, he's a young 29. He's not an old 29 about to be 30 when the season kicks off. So he's a couple years older than what Khalil Mack was, but a better player than Khalil Mack was too, I think, up until this point.
Yeah.
More sacks, defensive player of the year award, whether he's rightfully won that or whatever. He's had, oh my goodness, Brian, quick math, 32, 28, I don't know what that comes out to, 50 sacks?
60.
60? Yeah, something like that.
32 and 28 is 60.
I'm sorry, it was like 16 and 16 and 28. So he's had 16, 16, 14, and 14. That's his last 4 seasons. And he's played damn near every game. Would it be nice? Would you like salivate at the thought of that? Could the Steelers use some defensive line help and somebody of that caliber? Just think about the salary cap, though. They've got $40 million available, projected by overthecap.com, which we'll use for a lot of these valuations on, what this roster is going to look like. I don't think they could afford him because they got to find a quarterback somewhere. It don't matter who they bring in. There's not enough money there for Myles Garrett. And then the following season, you're looking at not only you got the quarterback that's going to be on the books, whoever that might be, you've got a lot of guys that are going to be up for contracts. Do you bring back either this year or the following year? You're looking at already Najee Harris. You're looking at Jalen Warren, restricted free agent. You're looking at George Pickens entering the final year of his contract, of his rookie deal right now. You've got to start paying guys on offense, and they are paying a boatload of people on defense. The only way that works is if somebody like Cam Hayward retires, and that doesn't necessarily take his money off the books. But Garrett's contract's kind of interesting, my dude. His base salary is like $1 million or so because they kept restructuring his contract in Cleveland. And then he's got like a void year where it's like a $40 million cap hit for the Browns. All of it's been converted to bonuses. As we know, bonuses stick with the previous team unless there's some cash consideration. There's funny business that goes on. There's things that can be done. But for the most part, for the Browns to move on, those two first-round picks also means that they're still tied to the salary cap and the dead cap hits of trading this player, and then a new team doesn't have that. I think Myles is also looking for that. One of the Bosa brothers went over $30 million with his recent contract. Nick's in San Francisco, right? It's Nick. So he's over 30. Garrett's around like the 5th highest paid edge rusher right now. He's not like underpaid, but TJ just went a tinch up to him, and a few other guys just went up just a tinch over the last few seasons. So he may even be using this as leverage just to get more money out of Cleveland, and they better be looking in the couch cushions and stuff for change, because I know they float things around, but that Deshaun Watson contract, that's going to end up being the worst deal in NFL history, especially now if Myles Garrett leaves town because of it too.
Oh, absolutely. as I said, the answer is just no, right? It's not that you wouldn't like to have Myles Garrett on your team. It's not that he's not a quality player. It's not that he can't help. It's just no, because it doesn't work. That's all.
Yeah, I don't think it works. I mean, is he an upgrade over Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton? Yeah, obviously all of those guys. But
no question.
Geez, you look at the contract that even Alex Highsmith has, I think at the time signed into being a top 10 or 15 edge rusher. He's certainly a top 10, maybe top 5 contract on the team itself. Now, Ogunjobi may be off the books after this year. He probably has an out in his contract. But still, the draft capital, this is, if you're considering the Steelers, I guess the question we need to ask is, are the Steelers in a rebuild? Or I don't think there is as much a rebuild as some other teams that just completely wipe everything out, just go on a fire sale, trade all their players away, and have absolutely zero foundation to build from. There's certainly a foundation here, but they also need some pieces. And in order to get those pieces, particularly when we keep talking about quarterback, that's going to probably happen in the draft. Nobody's getting rid of a quarterback, even if they're not that great. You saw the contract that like Tua got, for example. Yeah. They're going to hold on to the Tuas, the Trevor Lawrences, the Kirk Cousins of the world are still going to get a boatload of money. So the Steelers got to look somewhere else, and it's going to have to be the draft. If you get rid of your picks for Myles Garrett, and he's going to be 30 years old and costing you $30 million a season, I don't know. That just seems like it's a pipe dream all the way around.
Yeah.
The other guy, Cooper Kupp, smaller guy. He needs you would not confuse these guys in the grocery store aisle.
No.
There's Cooper Kupp, there's Myles Garrett. I'd probably have to look up the Myles Garrett, and I'm 6'5". So he'd probably dwarf me. I'm 6'5", 240-ish. He'd probably dwarf me. So can't say that about a lot of people. I'd probably dwarf Cooper Kupp still. Cooper Kupp, I got to look him up. Rams said they're moving on for sure, right? We all know, we discussed this during the season. We said whether it be a fit, a wide receiver too. Yeah, okay. All that stuff's great. He's going to be 32 in June.
That's the problem.
That's a major
32
problem.
With an injury history. If you can get him, well, here's, again, you got salary issues, right? You got to absorb his salary if you make the trade. I think you can get him for maybe a 5th and a 6th, right? Maybe a 4th round pick, maybe less. You can get him probably for very little, but as far as draft capital goes, so that's not the issue. But now you got to fit that salary in. And how do you fit the salary in? Do you do restructuring, whatever it is? And is it worth doing for a guy who's 32 years old with an injury history? That's the problem.
It's Julio Jones all over again going to
exactly. Atlanta, he may never play at all. Who knows?
Tennessee, is that who traded for him? And then they ripped up the contract and did something new. His base salary is $12.5 million next season, 2025, and then 33 years old. He signed for the next 2 years under his contract. 2026, his base is 14.8, almost 15. He's got roster bonuses that get paid out. Now, those would carry over. Those are in the contract, so the Steelers would have to pay out an additional $7.5 next year. That brings the contract to about $21 million roughly, and in the 20 range again with a $5 million bonus in 2026. The Rams are probably on the hook. Oh, and $5 million guaranteed. Hold on, that might be another figure that's not thrown in here as well. That might bump up next year's salary. Rams are going to have to eat some of this. They would save $7.5 and then $20 million over their next 2 years. So it would save them some money. The total cap number under his current contract, this is if he stayed with the Rams, 29.7 and $27.3 million. Too much for a guy his age that has missed, played 12 games in each of the last 2 seasons. So he's missed 5 apiece, 10 total over the last 2 years, and then only played 9 games in 2022 before that. So he missed 8 games the year before that, 18 games over the last 3 years. I'm sorry. It's just, this is something that would have to be a bargain basement deal. Would I think he'd be a boost? It would be temporary, very temporary, because he could go, woo. We've said this how many times?
31, 32.
31.
That's the drop off.
That's the cutoff. Very few guys. Randy Moss, and he fell off and then came back. I think he was even out of the league for a year. Jerry Rice. There aren't very many guys that go beyond that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know how to count them all on one hand as far as like guess, old man's club for wide receivers. It's not like Cam Hayward playing at 35. This is a position with like speed, the cuts, whatever, and then you pile on the injuries. And I'm out on it. I'm like, if they were able, I don't know what picks the Steelers still have left. I know they've given some up here or there. They gave one away for Mike Williams, who falls into that same category. I think that's a great place to start, actually, because Mike Williams, when we're talking about what the 2025 roster looks like, it's void. Oh, he's under a void year. That was a 1 year with the Jets. So that's kind of a moot point. It's not a guy I'm bringing back. He's 31 right now. And just be able to find a way to make an impact on this roster in 2024, I don't see it.
I agree. Look, I think the wide receiver room is going to get rebuilt to a certain extent, but it's going to get rebuilt either through the draft or they're going to call Seattle and trade for DK.
We were talking about that last year, and wouldn't have been nice. He's another guy that's getting up there, though. Physical specimen without the injury history, though. So a little bit different of a conversation, but still somebody that'd be highly paid. Cortland Sutton over in Denver, we kept talking about. But I mean,
I don't think he's even on the market anymore.
No, he's not. He got everything redone. Another wide receiver. It really depends who the quarterback's going to. I don't think it depends on who the quarterback's going to be. Whoever the quarterback's going to be, we know Rooney said, we belabored this on the last show. We don't want to hammer this home too much. Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, one of the two is probably coming back. And one of the two is probably going to find suitors in Las Vegas or New York with the Giants or Raiders out in Vegas, like I was just saying. Like one of those two teams, they're also quarterback needy. It could probably use a veteran and also then draft someone as well. There's no guarantee that player will end up starting wherever they land, but the guys, like, what makes this more enticing? If you don't get one of those guys, man, you're gonna be SOL. Like, and I'm not a big Fields fan. I've made that very well known. I'm like, he's had enough starts. His numbers track very close to Pickett and Trubisky. I put those out on social media. I'm gonna put together a full article at some point in the future detailing all of that. I know some folks are like, hey, well, this guy runs the football, and it's like, well, Mitch Trubisky had 4 rushing touchdowns for the Steelers his first year as the starter too. So you could manipulate some stats however you want. It's just he's not a 300-yard passer. He's not a multiple touchdown passer. He can move the chains some with his feet. That's great. Russell Wilson, on the other hand, I don't know that he's moving a lot with his feet. His heart's in the right place. You can see that they were scored some more points, got some more yards. Something fell apart at the end. Is that falling apart where we're swinging back around here to wide receiver? Because, okay, Mike Williams. You got Van Jefferson's another guy they brought on board that just, sorry, this may be a total home makeover, like you were saying. George Pickens is in the final year of his contract. Well, some people are like, well, it's 1 year, get something out of him. And it's like, well, you look what you looked like when you didn't have him. And then you've got to replace him and then try and find somebody else with the replacement, right? It's not going to be a Cooper Kupp. It's probably a pipe dream even talking about a DK Metcalf. But the wide receiver room is very, very largely going to look different. Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, who saw the field, sparingly. Ben Skoranek, also free agent. I would bring Ben Skoranek back. I liked his special teams play. I thought he was a fine blocker. I think he's somebody who already knows the offense. He could compete as a wide receiver 3 or 4, get in that mix with whoever the other guys are.
Yeah, I'm okay with bringing Ben Skoranek back. I don't think Van Jefferson comes back. I don't think Mike Williams comes back. You and I are landing in different places on Pickens, only in the sense that he has made it a conversation, right? If it was if he's a different player, if he's just a guy who's just busted his ass and has been drama free. Hell, if he's Antonio Brown for the first 4 years of Antonio Brown's career, right? It's a different conversation, right? You just automatically, you're going to re-up this guy. But Pickens has made it a question mark, right? He has made it a decision on, is this a guy we want to keep long-term and watch where he goes? Or is this a guy that, we need to divorce ourselves from and see what we can get out of it? So I'm not 100% sold that Pickens is back in the room next year. It would take a reasonable offer, and they'd need to have a plan in place to address it, because for sure if Pickens isn't in the room has gotten worse. Right? And they can't. It was bad room to begin with. They can't have it get worse.
If anybody's a trade candidate, would they get anything for Calvin Austin? I mean, then you got to replace a punt returner, too.
What, a fifth? I don't think you get what you got out of it, for sure.
Yeah, I know. And I'm not out on Calvin Austin, but Calvin Austin isn't going to just jump in like, hey, we got rid of Deontay Johnson. George Pickens should be able to pick up the slack. And I have my own questions. All last year, Brandon Ayuk, that was everywhere. That was heading into the draft. It was like after the free agency, we knew he wanted a contract. We talked about him for months, off and on, off and on, off and on. We said, do the Steelers need another wide receiver one? I don't know that they have a wide receiver one right now. Does that have to do with the offensive coordinator? Does it have to do with the quarterback? Or does it have to do with George Pickens? I think you can point fingers of blame like the Spider-Man meme at everybody in this scenario. There's still a huge question mark there that maybe if they had an Ayuk, maybe that raises the profile of this offense a little bit differently. And then maybe we could better evaluate the quarterback position too, because, one of these two guys is probably going to come back. We've also acknowledged that probably either one of these guys is probably not the answer or a long-term solution. We're getting into the Mike Tomczaks, the Kent Grahams, the Cordell Stewarts, the Tommy Maddox type the situation where we're recycling certain players, and somewhere within there, Charlie Batch gets thrown in and Byron Leftwich. Yeah. They end up being backups, but, that's where I see Justin Fields in the conversation. It's where I see Russell Wilson in the conversation. I'm still pro Russell Wilson just because Justin Fields, I mean, I looked at this. We talked about whether there was handcuffs on those first games. Looking back on it, the Falcons game, 6 Chris Boswell field goals. I was thinking about the conversation around, well, they benched this guy. He was 4-2. Do you remember the Las Vegas Raiders game? Do you remember our post-game show? You and I. We weren't very over the moon over that victory. That was one of those wins where you were kind of like, do we have a sense that this team is the team we think they can be? And that answer was no. It seemed like they kind of just skated by and won because the Raiders were just that bad, and the Steelers defense was opportunistic against whatever that quarterback situation was, different backups, different guys playing all the time there in Vegas. So you look at Fields' stats on that game, and they were just lower, and he didn't even have 200 yards passing against the Colts or the Cowboys. And the Cowboys game is one where the Steelers defense forced 3 turnovers. They got 4 in total. One was blocked field goal or turnover on downs because of the field goal, I believe. And it was punts. They didn't even have 100 yards of offense in the first half, and the game was 6-3. And somehow you go back and look at that, and you're like, how on earth did they lose this game? And I just feel like it's just more pulling teeth. Then you're at the end of the season, and we're going to look at defense too, because the defense, they were only giving up 16 to 18 points, maybe even fewer at the very beginning, 13, 14 against those teams. Because even the Chargers, where Fields had a fantastic game, I was like, hey, if this guy does this, might be on to something. And then he was unable to replicate it in the next 3. They moved to Russ, offense soars. You come after the bye, you beat a team like the Commanders that's on the comeuppance. You're like, okay, I'm feeling good about this. Then you have that crappy game that's set up on Thursday night with the Browns after you play the Ravens. You beat the Ravens. You're feeling pretty good. You're on top of the AFC North with 2 wins, and then the whole thing just goes into crapper. Defense gives up a bunch of points. The offense could do nothing. It's just like a giant mess, and it leaves us in this situation right now where we can't confidently say, well, if they had Russell Wilson next year, they're going to absolutely do this. It could look like the beginning of the year, the beginning of Russell Wilson starting, or it could look like the end of Russell Wilson starting. The same if you run it back with the same defense. If you go with Justin Fields, is it going to look more like it did with Trubisky and with Pickett? And you need that defense to play strong. But what if they go and do the thing that they did with Russ in those last 5 games? Fields is going to be stuck in the same situation. So for quarterback, for me, it's just bring back one of the guys that knows this system and then put some pieces around him. They're going to have to do that. Wide receiver, I think they're going to have to look in the draft. We're going to look at free agents that are available, but the guys on this roster right now, we're pretty much like, meh, right?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate description. Look,
Yeah.
this is one of the rare occasions where the who of the quarterback is it's important, but it's less important, right? And the reason being, they got enough holes that were exposed at the end of last year, enough problems that were exposed, that any quarterback they can get via either trade or free agency, or in this draft where it is, we said that the Kenny Pickett draft was a historically bad. This is bad too. This is a very bad quarterback draft. Generally speaking, there may be guys who turn into something, but you're not basing it on what you've seen so far, right? And they all have flaws and warts. Even the two guys who are likely to go in the top 10. As somebody said, compare this year to last year, and there isn't one guy who goes in the first round this year that's in this draft. Okay, so what I'm getting at is, it matters less who they end up bringing back, as long as they know the system, they're comfortable enough in the system, and they can operate within the system. They need to fix so many other things, right? Give them the weapons that they need. They have to figure out their running back. They have to figure out their wide receivers. They have to figure out their defensive line. They have to figure out their offensive line. They got to figure out another cornerback. They've got a lot of stuff to figure out. And the quarterback is an important piece to that, but based on what you can get, it is probably, you're not finding the next Ben or the next Bradshaw or Brady or Mahomes in the group of people that are out there.
You know what? Brady, hold on a second, because somebody's like, you could definitely find, look at Brady, look at Purdy.
Hit or miss.
Well, I'm not even sold on Purdy still. I wasn't originally. How much of that is Kyle Shanahan?
Yeah, come on. Purdy isn't lighting up the world. He was operating within a system. Brady was a system quarterback. I don't care what you say.
Yeah, just the players that are around all of them. I think Brady grew into something different eventually, yes. But you tend to forget Brady, Purdy, those guys don't play unless the guys in front of them, unless Drew Bledsoe gets hurt. They may have they had three quarterbacks, I think. New England didn't always. Belichick wasn't always like a three quarterback guy, right?
Yeah.
But I think Brady might have been the third guy, at least coming into camp there. And then he ascended to the backup, and the rest is history, tuck rule and everything else after Bledsoe gets hurt. And Purdy is much the same way. They drafted Trey Lance. They gave away a bunch of draft capital to pick third overall Trey Lance right after Zach Wilson. And you look at that and you're like, wow, those are some bad. That'll set franchises back a long time, because my whole thing my thing with Fields has been, he started 44 games in the NFL. This will be entering year 5.
Yep.
Had he played with the Steelers, had the Steelers drafted him as a first rounder, and had he been playing here the last 4 seasons and played the way he's played, people would have ran him out of town like Kenny Pickett. They would have ran him out of town 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
So how much more patience do you have? When does he fulfill the potential? And people will mention like Sam Darnold. I'm not exactly sure that he's there yet either. And I don't want to get into this whole thing again, but we have named so many quarterbacks over the years, the Mariotas, the Winstons, everybody like that have failed. More than likely you're going to draft a quarterback and they're going to fail. And in order to know if they're going to fail or not, you probably have to let them start 20 to 30 games and then 2-3 seasons, and you set everything else backward if it doesn't work out. And even when they do turn out good, well, Josh Allen needed all this time, and Peyton Manning didn't have a good rookie season. Exactly that. And even Ben got kind of lucky. You look at Ben's statistics weren't great over the first 3 seasons either. They got to grow, they got to learn, they got to get that experience, and whether or not they turn that corner or not, it's when you then have to decide, is this the guy, or are we cutting loose from this guy? So hard to do when you're constantly changing offensive coordinators. If you put another quarterback in there and they're learning it, there's just nobody out there that I'm interested in having other than the 2 guys they just had this year. But it is important to note, Kyle Allen's also a free agent. I'd bring him back probably at least as the backup. Like, I'd feel comfortable if you bring back either. I'm not going to say comfortable, but I'd be okay with Wilson or Fields, and then Allen is your backup. And then if you end up one of these quarterbacks, it's not a great draft, and it's like Desmond Ridder falls into the 3rd round or something like that. I remember you used to rag on Sam Howell really bad too, and he fell in there. Matt Corral, that draft class was just not that great. It could happen
Very
again.
bad.
Yeah, it could happen again.
Yeah.
So who knows? Who knows where Will Howard's stock is, and McCord, who moved to Syracuse, and guys like that. They're very much developmental quarterbacks. You're looking at like another Landry Jones. You're not looking at, well, all these guys got hurt and Purdy got put into a good situation and Brady got put into a good situation and then they excel. And they're going to be running for their lives if they don't patch up the offensive line. But before we get to the trenches, my friend, running back. Najee Harris coming back. He had some Instagram posts. He was on a boat somewhere and he's just like, I'm on a boat, mother, and he's flipping the bird everywhere. And some people are starting to take that as, will he return? Will he not return? I've already seen mutterings of that, and it's dumb. It's dumb, the speculation and rumor mill you have. The problem is Jaylen Warren is a restricted free agent, so a new contract, something, even if it's for 1 year, they're going to have to lock him up. And of the two guys that they're going to try to hold on to long term here, I think that you're probably looking at holding on to Jaylen Warren as opposed to Najee Harris. Even though Najee Harris has been very serviceable, I believe he's been given a raw deal too. He's been playing behind bad offensive line play. He still somehow churns out the yards. He's durable. He's available for every game. He doesn't miss games. He usually doesn't turn the ball over. He can be used in the pass game. I think he's a quirky teammate. I'm not sure if he's a leader in the locker room or not. The Steelers need some of those guys too. That's some of what's missing when a Ben Roethlisberger, Marquise Pouncey, and those guys kind of fade away after all these years in order to get back to the Steelers' way. So is there a continuity there with Najee? Can you afford to have Najee and Jaylen Warren? Is Najee looking for like some big, is he looking for Jerry Jones to give him a bag? Because that's the kind of guy that would go, ooh, running back, and then throw $60 million at him. We saw the resurgence of the position this past season. Everybody's like, nah, we don't want Aaron Jones. We don't want, but Josh Jacobs, hey, I'll take that guy. And you saw these guys, Saquon and everybody else, move around the league. And somebody like Najee Harris, I think, and their agent, they're sitting there looking at that and saying, hey, Steelers, if you don't pony up, maybe one of these other teams will be foolish enough to do so. I'm a coin flip. I'm sorry. I'm a coin flip as to whether or not he comes back, both if I want him back and both if the team will do that. I think it's 50-50 either way. I'm good either way too.
I think that I'm more like it's probably 75-25 that he comes back, 75% that he doesn't. Not because just because of, you can't underestimate the stupidity of other teams to overpay for people, right? I like Najee. I would not be upset to have Najee come back. But it has to be in the right footing, the right price. If they fix the offensive line, I think the point that you made is very accurate. With the right offensive line, you have no idea who Najee can be, right? With a dominant offensive line, you have no idea what he can produce, right? Because he's never had one, right? The entire amount of time he's been here, right? The offensive line has been subpar. It has not been a dominant offensive line. Put that guy behind a dominant offensive line, and maybe he's Derrick Henry. Maybe not, but we don't know, which is why I'm not upset if they bring him back. I just don't think they're going to be able to. And while I like Jaylen Warren a lot, I'm not sure Jaylen Warren is your feature back as a long-term solution, right? Now you're back to Isaac Redmond days to a certain extent. And not that Jaylen Warren is Isaac Redmond. Isaac Redmond was more of a power back than Jaylen Warren is. But, you're not talking about having a elite level running back. So, you got to figure that out. Whether they draft somebody in one of the second or third rounds, and because they know Najee's not going to be here, or whether they find a way to bring Najee back and they focus on, fixing the offensive line. They got a lot of stuff to do. They got a lot of work. They got a lot of work ahead of them.
Oh yeah, I know. That's why this roster is going to look a lot different than you may think. I was trying to look at like some of the running backs that might be up. And Najee's about at the top of the list. Maybe Aaron Jones, who's now north of 30. You've got like a AJ Dillon, Nick Chubb, who's had his injury history, and he's 30 years old. Javonte Williams out of the same draft class. Not a lot of exciting names. Travis Homer, Alexander Madison, Amir Abdullah. J.K. Dobbins, who's had his share of issues. Chase Edmonds has had some too. Like all of these guys are almost like around that 30-ish, 29, 30 years old kind of area, with the exception of Javonte and then Najee. Najee and Jalen Warren to me are Jerome Bettis and Willie Parker. You take Jerome Bettis out of the equation and just Willie Parker, it's, they still got it done, but can Warren play a full 17-game season? You're not going to do bell cow anymore. I think Tomlin has finally realized that. Mm-hmm. He has used committee. He did use committee back then with Parker. They have Mweldy Moore. And somebody else too. It's escaping my memory. But the other committee didn't work with like Isaac Redman and, Baron Batch and just some Chris Rainey. They tried that. Dree Archer was thrown into that mix somewhere. There's some bad running backs.
That one was never going to work.
After Mendenhall did well, and then Mendenhall got hurt and was never the same player again. So, yeah, the running back room could look different. I'd be totally fine if they ran it back and they were able to bring Najee back. It depends what he's going to ask. That quarterback contract looms large. The tight end room, it should look about the same. Freiermuth extended. Darnell Washington under a rookie deal. Michael Pruitt, he's older and, whatever. He's like 33, 34 years old. I know he's an Arthur Smith guy. He's a vet min type guy. I don't know that he comes back. Connor Hayward is still that hybrid. He's still under a rookie contract. He may be fighting for a roster position regardless because of his specialized kind of usage, kind of like a Jalen Samuels. He's a guy that you like, but where do you play him? Where does he fit in? Primarily as a special teamer, right? So we could immediately kick over to, as you've said, repairing the offensive line. At least they have one foot in the door. We're not like, hey, the Steelers need to use 10. They need 10 areas where they need to use a first-round pick. They've used a few of these, and they've got one coming back that didn't get to play in Troy Fautanu. Problem is, Mason McCormick. You're thinking maybe he's the future. They're drafting, planning ahead. Maybe James Daniels doesn't come back, free agent. Now he comes back. What's his value after an injury? Is he a guy that they could bring back because maybe he doesn't have the market? What's his medicals look like? What's his physicals look like? Is he ready to go? Right at free agency, he may not get signed right out the gate by anyone. I don't know. It's a mystery. You know what I mean? These cards are held closely to the agent's vest in order to get the best deal for their players. We do know that Daniels was very good when he did get the play. I think Zach Frazier will make a leap in year 2. I thought he did excellent. He made the Pro Football Writers all rookie team. He had a pretty high Pro Football Focus grade, which I know we only care about those when they actually, attribute things, like only 2 sacks for Isaac Seumalo, who got named to the Pro Bowl. Dan Moore Jr. Broderick Jones. Does Broderick live up to the billing at left tackle, or is he just as bad as he was on the right? Doesn't provide an upgrade to Dan Moore. I think at least if Fautanu pans out, if you do bring Daniels back, or you got McCormick back with an extra year, or you find somebody else that's a guard, right? I feel like guard is a position that's more easily to be had, and maybe the Steelers are really only a player, maybe not even a player away from hopefully having this line fixed.
That's hopeful. I mean, it is definitely hopeful. If Fautanu is a good tackle, which is up in the air right now, we don't know. I feel like they both Broderick Jones and Fautanu were guys that were not your normal prototypical tackles, right? They did things in college that tackles didn't really do. And while they were really good in college and their athleticism was able to allow them to overcome, that doesn't always push its way into the pros. So I don't know. Broderick Jones is starting to verge on the heading of bust. But we haven't seen him play his natural position, so I don't know. We could look, if James Daniels doesn't come back, maybe you find some way to slide a new guard in through the draft, maybe through free agency, and maybe all of a sudden you got Fautanu on the right, you got Broderick Jones on the left, and you see what you got. I think that's what they have to do anyway. You've got to see if these bookend tackles are going to be the tackles that you move forward with. it's pretty clear right now, at least, that Broderick Jones probably isn't the answer at right? So you got to figure that out.
Yeah, we knew Dan Moore wasn't the answer at right. I don't think Dan Moore will be back. We'll have some more ground to cover here, Brian, because, this is still very heavy on the offensive side of the ball for this conversation. As we said, we'd probably have to split this up. We'll throw special teams in with the defense when we bounce back around to this topic next week, because out of all of the guys that are in the top 10 here when it comes to these contracts, I'm only seeing like maybe one or two dudes that play on the offensive side of the ball. Everybody else is on that highest paid defense, and there are a lot of question marks there, and also some free agents. But boy, the Steelers still have their work cut out for them on the offensive side. Quarterback, wide receiver, running back's a question now. We still have question marks on the offensive line, and the offensive line is going to be the most important thing. I think you hit the nail on the head. What if Najee Harris played in Philadelphia? Probably puts up some pretty big numbers too. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle for the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward in 2025. But we do think that this team, at least on offense, is going to look a lot more different than they did in 2024. Thank you, my friend, once again for joining us. I know you're up against it. I know we're up against it, folks. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow us, leave a rating or review wherever you may be watching or listening. You could always watch the show's video version on YouTube next day, also on one of our 2 Spotify feeds. Also, be sure to catch us on social media, putting some new stuff out there in the off season. Always looking for some suggestions too. So leave some comments. Unless you're like one of these 2 other guys. The one guy said I was terrible and said I was a liar because I said Justin Fields threw 5 touchdown passes. I'm like, it's statistics, man. I'm like, versus opinion. Hey, you know what? I don't get too riled up. Somebody has a difference of opinion. You and I don't always agree, Brian. Just we always turn out to be right too, which is weird. So
that's true. We're always correct. True.
So, folks, that'll do it for us as we always close out the show here. My name's Joe. His name's Brian. Till next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.